I'm going to get right to the reading. Form. The universe hums like a great harp string, resounding a mighty chord, answering each thought by returning a thing from the place where all things are stored. The universe's law. As far as the eye can see, the mind project, and the spirit perceive, there is nothing but eternal and immutable law, working with the tiniest unit of matter he can visualize. Man observes that the atom has a nucleus and moving parts which circle this nucleus in never-ending motion. Working with the largest unit of matter which he can visualize, man observes that the solar system has a nucleus and moving parts which circle this nucleus in never-ending motion. How strange that the smallest and largest units we know are identical in their construction. Indeed, it is as if there were many mirrors in the mind, reflecting one eternal law and infinite gradations of size. No doubt, the atom contains many atoms of its own. No doubt, the universe is but a part of many increasingly greater universes. How small and lost we seem as we perceive the vast reaches of infinity. Yet all our perceptions exist in mind, and just as surely as we perceive them, we are the center of them. Our premise is that thoughts make things, and in order to substantiate such a transcendent truth, we must turn to the beginning of all form. What is the one basic substance that permeates all space and all time? If we take apart a substance and discover atoms, and we take apart the atom and unleash energy, we must eventually say that the basic thing behind all form and all creation is energy. What then is this energy? It obviously does not explode helter skelter throughout all space, but rather becomes apparent only in matter or in movement, and always such matter or movement attains an intelligent existence or moves in an intelligent direction. The design and flow of all energy is such as to leave no doubt that basic and eternal in the universe are everlasting and immutable laws of action which alone account for the accumulation of substance into form. Inherent in these laws are movement and activation which set up the atom and the solar system alike without regard to size. Indeed, lacking a specific viewpoint or a scale of relativity, the solar system and the atom are identical as they assuredly must be in the universal subconscious mind. A living universe. This universal subconscious mind, this first cause, this infinite plan and energy, then is the stuff from which all things are made. In its pure form, if indeed it is ever perceived as such, it is represented only by intelligent movement or by a word which seems much more concisely to describe it: law. Its first intelligible manifestation is in a center of force, which on the smallest scale we know is represented by the atom, and on the largest scale we know is represented by the solar system. Nothing extraneous to the law calls into being these centers of force. It is the nature of law to manifest them, for the law is one of life and movement and energy, which by its own nature congregates itself into units of similar frequency in a vibrating universe. To consider this further, let us attempt to visualize all space as consisting only of vibration. We need not ask ourselves what it is that vibrates, nor postulate as to what causes the vibration, for the vibration is intelligence alone, and the force it exerts is of intelligence alone. The vibrations in pure universal intelligence are established on many different frequencies, and all vibrations of one frequency are inevitably attracted together to form a unit. This unit, this center of corresponding vibrations, we know as an atom, or as the solar system, the first sign of visible form, the first evidence of tangible matter, called to into existence by the very nature of infinite law acting within and upon itself. The formed atom also sets up a vibration, seeks out other atoms of corresponding vibration, and then this coalescence of units vibrating on the same frequency, there is formed matter as we know it in our physical world. Thus, matter is formed from intelligence, and more important, intelligence and matter. In fact, intelligence is matter. Since intelligence must be conscious, it is an indisputable fact that we are surrounded by a living universe, that that there is consciousness in all things. The consciousness of the atom. Now you must bear with this very necessary discussion of the beginning of things and the nature of substance. Because by see, somebody that really wants to do this and really learn it, they got to go this deep. And when you love what you're doing, it doesn't matter what you got to go through to get the truth. So that's the reason why I had already studied this already, but I'm just putting it out there so that way if I'm someplace, all I got to do is plug into the YouTube, I can hear one of my videos and be reminded, right? Because certain things are already happening already. You know what I mean? I just have to be in expectation. You know what I'm saying? And just don't watch the pot boil. Thomas Edison was extremely preoccupied with what he termed the obvious choice of the atom, and his infinite acceptances and rejection of the myriad combinations of chemistry when two chemicals were put together in solution, and some of the atoms of one combined with some of the atoms of the other, Mr. Edison was forced to ask himself why those particular atoms and not some of the others, and indeed, why any of the atoms at all. The only answer he could possibly conceive was the atoms of each chemical exercise a conscious choice whether they would or wouldn't combine with the atoms of the other chemical. Now, Mr. Edison certainly aired no views as to the self consciousness of the atom, but only of the intelligence or consciousness of the atom. In other words, the ability of the atom to make a choice. The atom, the building block of the universe, is a center of force, and the atom is conscious, working in accordance with law or universal intelligence. The atom seeks out other atoms which vibrate at a corresponding rate, and the coalescence of such atoms forms that which we designate as inanimate matter: water, earth, air, and minerals. So I guess fire would be combined with air. Expanding consciousness. Now then, you may well say, this is all well and good as a plausible theory as to the formation of substance in a living universe, but how do you account for life? Let us repeat. The entire universe is alive. There is nothing dead, nothing inanimate. When Jesus said, God is not a God of the dead, but a God of the living, he was revealing the basic truth of all creation. For all living and all intelligence and all is conscious, and the great motivating force of all life is its attempt to expand its consciousness. In other words, it seeks to know itself. Though we may safely attribute consciousness and intelligence to the atom, there remains not the slightest possibility that the atom is self-conscious. In fact, all evidence points to the consciousness of the atom being of the lowest possible order. It chooses, but its choices are within the rigid scope of operating law. When certain numbers of atoms begin vibrating together on a certain frequency and form, let us say a rock, there is created in the rock a kind of consciousness which is on an infinitely lower scale than that of the atom, for the rock exhibits practically no ability to choose. Yet there can be no doubt but what there is actually a certain consciousness in the rock, for a group of conscious units must of necessity form a group consciousness. The rock exists, therefore it must be conscious. It consists of conscious intelligence and must then have some consciousness of its own, although so far below our level of consciousness as to be indiscernible to us. From the rock, sand, earth, water, air, to the formation of the pain, pleasure, responsive amoeba, a thing that grows and feeds and produces itself, what gigantic step is this? Expanding consciousness, and only that and nothing more. First, we have energy moving according to law, congregating into centers of force by its own nature, setting up polarization nuclei of positive polarity around which revolve electrons of negative polarity. These centers of force, or atoms, have lives of their own, are conscious. The nature of these little lives is to congregate with others vibrating on the same frequency, and thus matter is called into existence, which is basically not matter at all, but merely units of intelligent energy. Secondly, we have all form consisting of many individual lives, building up to a conscious whole, building up to a conscious entity which attempts to work out its own purpose. From these two conclusions, we go on to a third. The form which results from the union of many individual lives or consciousness is the result of the consciousness of the whole. In other words, the form of the rock is the result of the consciousness of the rock. The form of the amoeba is the result of the consciousness of the amoeba. And the form of the human being is the result of the consciousness of the human being. Life seeks to know itself. Now, once again, you may say this all sounds reasonable enough, but where does this consciousness come from? The entire universe is caught up in a mighty work of expanding consciousness because it is the nature of universal intelligence to seek to know itself. God knows himself only as a thing. Before you shout blasphemy or irreverence, tarry a while and dwell on this premise. Visualize space. It goes on forever and ever. And if in your mind's eye you retreat trillions of miles from the earth and draw a huge circle with the earth at the center and say, this indeed is all space, what then is on the other side of your circle? The only answer is more space. Space as we know it, or infinite intelligence as we know it, or universal law as we know it, or universal subconscious mind as we know it, cannot possibly have any limits or any boundaries. How is it possible for something which has no boundaries to ever know itself? In order for it to know itself, it must be able to say, I am this. And in order for it to say, I am this, it must become something within boundaries, something finite, a thing. And that is exactly what the universal subconscious mind is doing. It is becoming things. It is seeking an expanded self consciousness, and that part of which has achieved the greatest self consciousness which we are able to observe is the human being. What is evolution? It is life expanding to a conscious oneness with God. As time progresses and our consciousness expands, we are growing closer and closer to this attainment. Indeed, this is a clue to the mystery of life and evolution and the destiny of man. Have no fear of your smallness in relation to the vastness of limitless space, for there are no limits to the mind, and there are no limits to expanding consciousness. The destiny of mankind is that man's consciousness will expand to the point where he is one with all creation. On this great day, it will be as simple for one man to be thought in contact with another 5,000 miles away as it is now to speak to a friend in the same room. On this great day, the mind of man will span space and time, and the limitations of form and existence will be solely of the spirit in one eternal now. The past, the present, and the future will be one. All space will be one. All form will be one. Man's consciousness will be the consciousness of God.